Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the latest episode of the Digital Adoption Show, where we host top L&D, HR, and tech luminaries and talk about what's next in the future of work and tech. I'm your host, Neha Smriti, Growth Marketing Manager at Whatfix. And today we are going to answer the question, are AI avatars the future of learning and development? To discuss this topic, we have invited a very special guest who talks about AI avatars like they are his next of kin. Since the topic of our discussion revolves around the subject, it's fitting to invite Kevin Alster, head of Synthesia Academy. Kevin is a recognized name as emerging tech enthusiast obsessed with technology, learning, and design. At General Assembly, Kevin developed enterprise L&D solutions, helping businesses humanize tech integration. And now at Synthesia, he teaches others how to use synthetic humans and AI for workplace learning. Kevin, welcome to the show. The last time I think we spoke, you were going to get married. So congratulations on that. And how has your married life been treating you?
Yeah, I think it's good to close the loop and say that I was going to get married. I did, in fact, get married. How's married life treating me? It's treating me well. I feel like it sits well. It's people ask you if they're like what's the big change or like, how do you feel any different? I do feel different, but I haven't been able to quite articulate how. Oh, I guess it's more, I guess, a general appreciation. What I will say is that it was a partially an Indian, a traditional Indian ceremony, and also there were Jewish rituals in there as well. And I found that our priest was very good at kind of translating how the rituals and traditions have shown up to a modern day. So obviously I had seen my wife before, but there's a period where I'm looking down and I'm holding, I don't know, like a 2 kilo ring of flowers. And it's like, I could see everybody is watching my future wife walk in. And I was like, oh, this is kind of exciting. So I'm still processing this experience. It's very fresh for me, but it's going well.
Nice, great to know that. And yeah, Indian weddings can be complicated, especially the rituals. But I hope you liked it.
Yeah, all good.
Perfect. So to start this discussion, before we even jump to the questions, I wanted to know if you could tell our audience more about yourself and your time with Synthesia, and also if you could share one of your passions, which is outside the work and which is very particular to your heart and close to your heart. So if you can talk about one of your passion and your time at Synthesia and your journey so far.
Yeah, so I think in thinking about this morning, I was reflecting on kind of how I want to tell my story, and I think the thing that I kind of had this epiphany that since I've been little, I've always wanted a twin. Like I was like, I have one older brother, but if I could have a twin, then one of us could have gone to school, the other one could have relaxed. Maybe later on in life, we could have learned different languages. Maybe we can get, learn different instruments or make different groups of friends, and then the secret would be we wouldn't tell anyone, and that we would just everybody would be so impressed because it looked like we did so much more with just as one person. But I was thinking this is so perfect because this is what ties me to like the future of avatars and digital twins and what do we hope our work and lives will change. And so just this little epiphany and think about today and how we're talking about AI avatars, this idea of a digital twin. I didn't even know what it was back then, but I knew that I wanted it. I think as far as Synthesia, before Synthesia, I'd been in education and learning. So my first career was a kindergarten teacher, then moved into ed tech and then corporate learning and also branded learning, which I think has some interesting ties to the work that I do now. But I think as far as I know, I'm the only employee at Synthesia who didn't know about Synthesia until I met the founders, which I think is kind of funny because Synthesia has just exploded since I've been there. And it's almost 3 years now. But I had just moved to Copenhagen at the time. I was doing corporate reskilling and upskilling. And 2 days after I moved in, this other person moved into my apartment. And that would be the person who is now the head of product marketing, but at this time was a very small company. And he was like, hey, we're looking for someone with an L&D background. You should meet the founders. So I met Victor and Stefan, like, wow, you guys are doing some cool stuff. Then I saw the product. And at that time, it was just a very rudimentary editor and a few avatars. But I was thinking, oh my goodness, I could have used this in one of my past projects where I was translating a course on the art of buying and selling at auction at Sotheby's. But we wanted to translate that course into Spanish, and I had paid $15,000 to have this voiceover re-recorded in Spanish and an editor to actually edit that in Spanish as well. And that took up a lot of time and money. And so that was kind of like an aha moment for me. And so that's kind of what brought me to Synthesia, and that was 3 years ago. And it's a lucky story, one that I think is a bit serendipitous, I think is the word I'm going to go with.
Right. So I am really glad that since you couldn't have a twin in your childhood, you were able to make your own in later in life. So
Well, you never
yeah,
know when these things are going to.
great, great, amazing. So now that I know your story, and obviously as I told you, we have a fun bit round going forth.
Yes.
A quick rapid fire round. We call it triple strike because we have three quirky questions for you. So are you ready to be triple strike, Kevin?
Ready to be triple strike, Neha. Let's go.
Cool. So my first question to you is, if you had to create your own avatar, what would you name it? And what would be its
So I should answer this by first saying, Neha, I have multiple avatars that are just all over. But if I had to choose one, if I were to have my own avatar, they'd be named Lenny after Lenny Kravitz, and their catchphrase would be "It ain't over till it's over," which is the chorus of one of my favorite songs. But also, I think for L&D as well, "It ain't over till it's over."
perfect? I think that's a great catchphrase. I think I'll be using it. I'll be stealing it for my future, maybe.
Please do. Yes.
Okay. So my next question to you is, if you had to live in any fictional universe, which one you would choose?
So the fictional, so I'm not sure that this could be a U.S. centric reference, but in the 1960s and the 80s, there was a cartoon called The Jetsons, which was about, do you know The Jetsons? It's like a family. Okay, so they were a family that was living in the future, and this is like old cartoons, but they were a family that's living in the future. And in this future, there's floating homes, there's flying cars, there's a 3-day work week, and all these incredible conveniences that we want for ourselves in the current day. And so I would choose to live in this fictional universe because apparently they've already figured out how really to bridge this relationship of humans and technology. Again, a 3-day work week is my measure for have they figured it out or not. A 3-day work week.
Same. I was sold at once you said 3-day work week. And I would love to live in this fictional universe for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've already figured, things out like again, the robot made there's some things that we'd have to adjust for modern context, but
That is
they
so
had
true.
figured these things out. Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Okay. So my last question is, if you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would that be?
Hands down easy. This is an Indonesian dish, nasi goreng. It has the spice, it has the rice, both things that I
And
like.
I love nasi goreng for that matter. And I love Asian food. I
There we go. All right. Yeah.
But it would have been difficult for me if I had to choose one because I'd have multiples. So I'm glad that you were spot
Well,
on.
I thought about this because I'm probably gonna have it after this talk.
Like perfect. So those were really fun answers, Kevin. And I think audience would be amazed to know your thoughts. Now let's move to the real bit of our podcast, the serious bit of our say so. And
Sure.
shall we start?
Let's begin.
Okay. So my first question to you is, when we first talked about this, you were talking about AI avatars and the impact on how they're like revolutionizing learning and development for the next decade or so. Could you start by giving our audience or explaining what these AI avatars are and what was the idea behind these and what were the challenges you were trying to solve? Those are like small bit of questions put together, but if you can just
Sure. Yeah. So
take
yeah. Yeah, well, let's unpack that. So I'll take that first question. So what are AI avatars? I think it's important to mention that AI avatars are human models created. So they're models that are created from real footage of actors, and they're animated using AI that's interpreting the written words or the typed words that you put in. And so what our tech at Synthesia does at a very high level is that it reads the words that people have typed in, and it interprets those words and sentences, and it uses them to generate an AI voice that should sound realistic, animate the avatar, and then give it the expressiveness that's based on the context and the tone of that script. And I think that's something that's important to mention because there have been different types of animated characters, or that's not something that is unusual in L&D. But I think what we've seen in the past 2 years or so is how AI avatars have really changed how we generate things like talking head videos, or who are these characters that we have in our learning experiences. And so if we look at what we've had in the past in learning and development, we use a lot of pictures or examples of characters to kind of tell different stories, or maybe kind of as course guides or facilitators, but what they've been in the past is kind of like these really static, kind of awkward stock images. But now, if you're able to type in text, you're able to generate essentially a talking head video or a character. And so, we're seeing it having an impact on L&D is in many ways. But I think first and foremost, starting with the simplest, is that L&D has, whether that's courses or resources or different types of digital learning, there's a need to use video as a way to deliver that information. And I'm not a person who thinks that we should use the video for everything, but if you need to create video, how would you have to do that in the past? You'd have to storyboard it out, you'd have to script it out, you'd have to then record yourself, or you had to be on camera, or even worse, I've had the terrible experience of having to coach subject matter experts who were not ready for camera to try and be on camera. And then you edit it down. Once you're done with that, then you have this MP4 file that you then put into your LMS or however you're delivering that content. But then as that video starts to live online, it starts to age. Maybe things go out of date. And if you need to make a change, then you need to go back and you need to re-record that. When you are talking about AI video or using AI avatars, if you need to switch voiceover, or if you need to translate into multiple languages, or you just need to make content up to date, you can now just click a button rather than me having to hire an editor. So the first and foremost use case is this idea of you can use AI avatars to generate video faster. And again, that is not the key answer to all of L&D's problems. There's, of course, problems of measurement. There's problems of how do we deliver these learning experiences. But really, this is what we're seeing is kind of the main use case. If you do e-learning or digital learning of any type, and you use video, it's very easy to put avatars into an AI video as a way to optimize your workflow, to make this work of creating the content go faster. And so on average, I think if you're talking budget-wise, people say, if you were to hire a live editing crew plus work hours, it'd probably cost you around maybe $2,500 to $5,000 per video. But then if you're able to create a video in minutes just by typing and kind of like building a PowerPoint, then there's the obvious cost savings there. But really, a big part of this is just saving people time. It costs so much time to create these things. There's a lot of other use cases as well, but I think that time and cost savings of creating the actual video is kind of the main key use for these AI avatars.
Perfect. So what I understand is it's obviously saving time for people, time cost, as we discussed. You also talked about it can be like once we showed a video, and if you want it to like convert into a different language, it used to be different. So do avatars also talk in different language? Like if I have an avatar, would Neha start speaking Chinese if I want to?
Exactly. That's how it works, where using AI to translate or using large language models, you're now able to move seamlessly between languages. I would venture to say that a lot of global companies, if they're making internal content, this is something where they'd have entire localization teams. I don't think AI is anywhere near perfect in translating that one for one, meaning to translate it appropriately into Tamil or Mandarin. There'd still be local and cultural considerations, but if you're looking to get 90% of the way there, yes, you can just click a button and suddenly your video's in French. And if you record your voice as well, if you create an AI voice that's a clone of your voice, Neha, then it'd be you in your voice speaking in French or speaking fluently in those languages. So it just opens up a whole other world where folks who were only able to communicate primarily with maybe English as a second language audience or native language English, you can now generate content that is appropriate for those other languages as well. And it's not just the voice, it's also on-screen text or any elements that you might have. So again, one-click translation. It's not perfect, but it'll get you 90% of the way there.
Okay, so that brings me to a follow-up question on the very specific thing that we were discussing. So what other customizations are available when it comes to creating your own avatars? So you talked about maybe translating, you talked about adding a bit like other elements also. So if you can just specify what other customization options are available, which the users can maybe take help from.
For sure. So when it comes to customization, I think where we're at with the technology now is that based off of the outfit that you're wearing or the way that you look, that's how you'll be crystallized as an avatar. Meaning you could maybe add a logo to a shirt or maybe even change the color of the clothes that you're wearing, but you couldn't make these really big changes like to the hair or to the face. It's very much kind of the way that technology works is what you see is what the model will become. I think if you are, there are two technologies that we have for creating these personal avatars. The first is to use essentially phone camera footage or webcam footage to then record the human performance. You read a script, and then you're able to turn that into an avatar and translate your script or your text into multiple languages and your voice. We also have higher quality production. And so this is for leaders at companies who often make maybe monthly or quarterly addresses to a global company, or their face is a brand within the company. We actually have those folks go to a studio. We record their avatar against a green screen, and what that allows you to do is change the backgrounds or the environments or the spaces that those avatars are in. But yeah, it's that's essentially how the tech works. So it's very limited customization at the moment. But the good news is that it's easy to create a personal avatar, meaning you can just do that with your webcam or your phone. And so you can go to other backgrounds. You can shoot it while walking in the park. We have one where it's like a yoga instructor who's doing yoga, but obviously then you could do it in other languages. So right now it's still very much how you experiment with the tech to see what you can make. It's very much at the beginning of this adoption curve. So we're still seeing what folks can create. It's exciting.
It will improve in the future, like how we have seen. I remember when first AI had introduced these kind of realistic avatars, they didn't used to look that realistic, if I remember. But I
Yeah.
recently saw one of your videos, and it took me like a minute or so to actually realize it's not real. It's not you talking, it's your avatar talking. So I
Yeah.
getting closer, and I think in the next months or so, there will be a lot of other things that we'll be able to do. So I'm looking forward.
Yeah. And Neha, to that point, I think what's interesting is, in the 3 years that I've been at Synthesia, just seeing the pace of the technology change. So, for example, when I used to show the avatars even a year ago, you had folks who were saying, well, I can tell that this part, like this, that maybe the shoulders don't match or this piece of hair was out of place. But then especially within the past 4 or 5 months, there's just been this huge technical shift in that the avatars are really not only do they present well, but they're expressive because they're reading the full context of a script. And I think that's what makes this generation of AI avatars different from the last generation, in that it's looking at the context of the script and saying, hey, what is the script actually saying? I'm not just looking at words and sentences. I'm looking at message, tone, and delivery. And then I'm using that to generate the avatar performance. So there's a closer match between what you'd expect to see reading versus how you'd expect to see somebody acting that out. So you're right. It's getting better and better. And I think it's an exponential curve as opposed to linear steps over time where it's getting faster for these new improvements. So it's the worst the technology will ever be, which is exciting.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. So, my next question to you is, Kevin, can you share a few examples for our audience where, for different companies or different use cases, and how you have used AI avatars so that they know what to expect? Like, what could be those stories of success where they have used and we have gotten results? So, if you could talk about those examples.
Sure. So the examples that I think are kind of the best use of this tool boil down to it kind of into three different buckets. So one of them is bringing skills, thinking about a experience and how these avatars are used to create a learning experience. Some of them are about communication and how we use video communication. And one of them is about more so kind of time or cost to delivery. And so I think the one that's my favorite and the one that I want to start with is we work with Zoom, who they have a lot of courses and resources for sales enablement training, where a lot of those courses are built in Articulate, Storyline, and Rise. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to create interactive courses and resources that can ultimately help them save on face-to-face training time. Because as you can imagine, pulling people away from their desks, from their computers to sit in the training actually is a huge cost to the company. And so what they've done is one of their instructional designers for this particular skill that they were teaching, he built these really interactive stories where he has this one called the Deal Detective, where he's created this entire story world where the learner is in the role of a detective, and they have to figure out where a deal has broken down and who they can question to save it. So there are different suspects, which are different stakeholders in this journey. There's different clues that they might find, but really they've used the avatars rather than just kind of having these flat pictures. They've used the avatars and they've used music to kind of really build this world and create this rich experience that not only gives the employees a chance to practice these skills, but it also kind of gives them motivation to continue in the story. And of course, a lot goes into the design of this, but what he's able to do, this instructional designer is able to do, is it takes a lot of different videos to generate something that's interactive and immersive and allows somebody to make decisions along the way. Meaning you have to have 500 versions of a conversation in order to get to 3 different outcomes. And so why I like this example is because it's moving away from the shift that we have in L&D of building courses and resources that are about information delivery rather than purposeful practice or giving folks information and then kind of giving them a chance to analyze it or bring their prior experience in. We're very much focused on saying, here's this information, now learn it and take a test. But this person at Zoom is using the avatars to really create different roles and characters to immerse the learner in the learning. Another big shift that we're seeing, especially in the Fortune 500 space, was DuPont, who is moving post-pandemic from virtual instructor-led training, because during the pandemic, we're all in our computers and training shifted mostly to online. They had a bevy of training that was in there teaching the fundamentals of operational excellence. This is something that is taught to the global DuPont chemical company. And what they did is they wanted to use these transcripts to create courses, asynchronous courses that they could deliver at scale, but they didn't have the video production resources needed to hire out an external company. And so rather than paying around $15,000 per video, because it has to be corporate and polished and really a high production experience, they're able to bring those skills in-house. And what I like about the story is that the L&D team now has a new service offering for the rest of the company, where before they were just kind of curriculum designers. Now they're able to kind of build solutions end to end because they have that video experience. So that speaks to more sort of, again, that idea of cost or time to create something. And then I think the last one for me was Heineken, it's more a general HR strategy that they have, where the tagline that our champion uses that they call PowerPoints poison points because everybody uses them and nobody pays attention. And so they're shifting their internal communication strategy from using these 45-minute webinar recordings to these short bite-sized videos that employees can download and watch on their own time. And they're experimenting with it as a way to have avatars deliver information, or maybe you have an avatar of a senior leader who's in charge of a particular business unit or department, and they're able to say, okay, this is my team, here's what you need to know, versus, hey, watch this 45-minute recording, which nobody will watch.
I think those were like really great answers. In fact, earlier discussion, you said that we create like it's more around creating videos, but I see a lot of synergy between different L&D use cases where we can, and we'll have to think about it, how better we can utilize these avatars. And I feel like if we integrate with other things that we have currently, there will be a much more wider use case ways that we can obviously utilize these avatars for. But those were some great answers. I love the detective bit of it. I think I'll use it for my
Yeah. And Neha, really quickly, I want to echo the importance of a point you just said, but that was this idea of re-examining our tools. I think over the past 10 years, we've accumulated all these different tools in L&D, whether it's like LMSs or LXPs or transcription software or all these different tools that we kind of just use because I guess the businesses that we work for have told us these are the tools that we use. But I think in this world of generative AI and large language models, there's an opportunity to kind of revisit what we're doing and what tools we use. And when I work with teams, I like to lead them through this exercise called unbundling, where we look at projects and outcomes from the past quarter, the past year, and we say, what were the tools that you used for this or why? And it's re-examining, okay, what can we actually plug into the AI tools that we use? Or what pieces actually will be better communicated through a video versus a 45-minute webinar? And so it's an opportunity to kind of revisit these tools and say, what are we using these for? What are we trying to achieve? And then maybe taking these 50 tools that maybe we use 5 of and really condense what we're using and really think about why for the experiences that we want to generate.
I think my next question to you, Kevin, would be like, how do you actually measure the effectiveness and ROI of? Because every bit of decision that we take for organization, we want to understand how do you measure the effectiveness and ROI of that uh,
Yeah.
for decision, and what matrices or KPIs do you use to measure that?
Yeah. It's interesting. So the short answer to this is it depends. I think when we talk about the ROI of AI avatar-driven training programs, I think that's where we have to take a step back and say, okay, AI avatars and video are just the tool for communicating this information. I think it's more relevant than to kind of level up, move a step above and say, what metrics are we looking for? What metrics are we actually measuring? Because it all depends on the L&D's kind of job within the business. So for example, I was talking with a team last week where their job is really, they're kind of like their reality is that they're kind of like a business or they're a content factory where the metrics that they're deciding are how quickly can you deliver this? Their big metric was time to develop. And so when we talk about ROI, we'd always love to think about what is the business impact of these L&D initiatives. But if you're not measuring that or if you're not looking at that, then the reality is that maybe yours are time to development metrics or optimization metrics. You can take a step back and say, oh, but what about performance objectives and other things like that? Well, it also depends on how you're assessing performance, what behaviors you're looking for. I think other metrics to keep in mind are engagement and sentiment. This would be the level 1 Kirkpatrick's. Some people call them smile sheets, but I think we often forget if people aren't motivated by the learning experiences we give them, you're probably not going to move up the rest of level 2, level 3, or level 4. So is it engagement and sentiment or is it motivation? And I think that when it comes to ROI, it's if you don't have a clear line between business objectives and what the learning team objectives are, any learning team is just going to be guessing. And so my advice to the learning teams that I work with is look at your most recent successful learning intervention and figure out who is the business partner that you teamed up with or who that requested this and figure out what impact the learning team's actual courses and resources or digital learning interventions or experiences actually impacted that person's business bottom line and start there. Or if you're stuck in the content factory, which is where a lot of L&D teams are, it starts with benchmarking the time that it takes to create these courses and resources and say, am I able to deliver it better, faster, cheaper?
Okay, so I think in the interest of time, because we are only left with, I think, 5 minutes.
Okay.
So last final question for you. I wanted to take this question, but yeah. So, and I wanted to be as truthful as possible. So, can AI avatars really fully replace AI like instructors, or they will always act like a supplementary tool? What do you think about it?
Yeah, sure. So I think that if I were to answer that question very truthfully, can AI avatars fully replace human instructors? I think the way that my short answer to that is the way that a lot of people teach and instruct and train now, the answer is yes. And that's because, again, a lot of the ways that we do face-to-face training, it very much mimics how we teach and learn in uni, where it's the instructor at the front, the students at the desk, the instructor says what they have to say, and the students take notes, where I think that doesn't mimic how people learn effectively. I think if I had to ask you about your favorite teacher, Neha, what made them your favorite teacher?
So, for me, it would be I was able to have a very clear communication with them. I could ask them question and they would come back to me in real time and just address those. So those were the teachers, and plus they had a very great clarity of thought. So when they understood my problem and just delivered whatever I wanted personally. So the more
Yes.
personalized, those were the teachers I used to love the most.
Yeah, to your point, it's the teachers who would maybe give you information, and then they would kind of test and question your assumptions, or they would open the floor to questions and ask the questions that you had. And I think that's the role that where human instructors need to shift into, which is we don't need to deliver information. Actually, large language models and AI avatars are pretty good at delivering that information that you might need to know in preparation for the human experience, in which you'll then be engaged in activities. You'll get a chance for practice and feedback and all the things that we need our human selves for. Just to go back to what this reminds me of is my first career as a kindergarten teacher, where I was reading a book aloud, reading a story aloud to a bunch of 5-year-olds. And how would I do it in year one? I would sit in my chair and I would read the book aloud and maybe point to each word. But I think in this day and age, is that something an AI avatar can do well? Yes. So how would I change the way that I read books aloud? Well, one, I'd get up off my chair and I would read the story to the students, but I'd be looking at students' faces and seeing who's getting this versus not. Can I use my body to act out and reemphasize key characteristics about the story to help them understand, comprehend the story better? Or I would mimic I think aloud of how I'm going through what just happened so that students might be able to visualize my thought process. This is kind of how we need to change what we use our human face-to-face time for versus our avatars who are really good at doing what we currently do. So do I think that human instructors will be replaced? No, but if we don't change the way that we deliver instruction, then yes.
True, true. Okay, that brings to me to the end of this discussion. And thanks a lot, Kevin, for those were some really great answers. I really had fun asking these questions. And yeah, so this discussion has truly been enriching. And now we know that virtual humans can have so much to offer. And who knew they would change the LND scenario? Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast today. And to our listeners, stay tuned for more content like this, featuring incredible thought leaders like Kevin here. And we are available on all major podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. If you want to reach out to Kevin, you can type in Alster on LinkedIn and you'll find him there. We'll be putting all the links in the description below. Whether you are at home or on the go, our podcast is your gateway to the learning and latest trend in L&D, HR, and tech. I'm your host, Neha, signing off. Thanks a lot.